Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Williamsburg City Council meeting of September 14th. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Ramsey?
Here.
Mayor Pons?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Here.
Ms. Kernscher? Here.
Welcome, everyone. First on the agenda are the council minutes for the August 7th and August 10th meeting. Are there any changes, corrections? Motion?
So I move that the minutes from the August work session and business meeting be accepted.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher? Aye.
This month, we have no matters of special privilege, which will take us directly into the public hearings. And first is the public hearing, PCR number 22-023, for consideration and action regarding the request to rezone 252 Patriots Lane from Corridor Business District B2 to multifamily dwelling district RM2 in order to construct 8 townhomes with a voluntary proffer condition and to remove the property from the Corridor Protection District. Ms. Green, welcome. Or Ms. Griffin, excuse me.
Okay.
I looked
Good
up and saw
afternoon.
Derek.
Good afternoon. I'm Mayor Pons and members of City Council. It's good to be here. I haven't been before you in, I think, 2 months, so I'm excited. We do have a request from 252 Patriot Lane LLC to rezone property located at 252 and Patriot Lane. The property is in our Corridor Business District, our B2 district, and it's approximately 0.753 acres. The applicant is requesting that the property be rezoned to RM2, our residential medium density district, and also be taken out of the Corridor Protection District, which is under the purview of our Architectural Review Board. The applicant here has provided a conceptual site plan. This site plan has been reviewed by city departments. Here you'll see conceptually 8 townhouses. This actually began as a request for 10 townhouses. It was reduced at the Planning Commission level. They are now only requesting 8 townhouses. This is under the 10 that can be built within the RM2 district. They are proffering 3 conditions. 1 is that they will only build 8 townhomes. 2 is that they will have a homeowners association and that they will have 2 parking spaces per townhouse and also 1 parking space in the garage. This gives you just a rendering of what the townhouses would look like. In all townhouse divisions, there has to be sidewalks. They are proposing a community trash collection area, and we have discussed this with Public Works, Police, and Fire, and they will be providing public and adequate public facilities. Here is a zoning map. You see the property outlined here. It is in the rear of 3032 Richmond Road. Currently, this is the Clarion Hotel. In 2006, this property was subdivided from what was then the Holiday Inn Patriot, and it's been vacant ever since. The applicant, of course, is requesting that it be residential. Around the RM2, you'll see there are 3 different multifamily townhouse units. The RS2 is showing the Piney Creek subdivision, and along Richmond Corridor is the B2 district. Here, what we find is that it is around 680 feet from Richmond Road, and this is another reason why they're asking for it to be out of the Corridor Protection District, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. One thing that we do look at when we are considering a rezoning is the compatibility with the comprehensive plan. The burgundy area above shows you the comprehensive plan designation is corridor commercial. The corridor commercial area does require that if you're going to have residential, that it should have a commercial component. The applicant is not requesting a commercial component. However, in this case, because it was subdivided from the hotel, it's a small area, 0.753 acres, and staff feels that outside of being vacant property, you really would not get a viable commercial business to go here. So we are recommending approval of the RM2 rezoning. Here, we're looking at location, surrounding land uses, and then, like I said, the commercial viability of the property. This just gives you an outline of the surrounding multifamily dwelling units. You have the Patriot condominiums, Westgate at Williamsburg, and Claiborne at Williamsburg. This is around 330 multifamily dwellings, and they will be adding 8 to this area. Staff has looked at traffic. We don't feel that the 26, and the 26 is based on the parking spaces that I talked about before, and then any ancillary development or ancillary delivery trucks that will come. We don't think that that would really substantially change traffic along the Richmond corridor. This then talks about the CP district and being removed from the CP district. The applicant did go to the Architectural Review Board to get their opinion on the removal, and at their April 11th meeting, the Architectural Review Board recommended approval to be taken away from the CP district. And again, the reasoning was because of it's no longer fronting on Richmond Road, and actually is around 680 feet from Richmond Road. The Planning Commission at their July 19th meeting recommended with a vote of 6-0 to rezone the property and the approval of the voluntary profit conditions as submitted. And I've told you about those. I'll go over those one more time. It's to construct no more than 8 townhouses. Again, they are allowed to build 10 in this particular RM2 district. They're also proffering driveways will be of a width sufficient for 2 cars, and also they will organize a homeowners association in accordance with Virginia law. Staff is recommending approval of this application, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any, and the applicant is also here to answer questions.
Great, thank you. So before I open the public hearing, does council have any questions for staff?
Ms. Griffin, there was one letter from a resident, kind of related but not related to the look of the area, from trash from the hotel property, and she was concerned about what would be going on this property. Do you know, has that been resolved?
Yes, there were about 3 residents that came from surrounding. One wanted to know about the homeowners association. They really was concerned that these would they were concerned if there would be rental home occupants. The conclusion was that this would be homeownership, and that's why he proffered to have the homeowners association. Another question was about the parking, and they've increased the parking so they can accommodate for guests to be within their development.
And I didn't see, there's not an affordable housing component to this, but I was wondering if through the process, and maybe this is a question for the applicant, what they anticipate the price range might be for these units.
We did talk about affordability at the time. They did not offer anything because it was only 8 townhouses.
Right.
But as far as the price, I would lean on the applicant to answer that
Okay,
question.
thank you.
Sure, anything?
I just had the affordability question as well, which maybe we can get to later, but I just want to make sure I understand, like leaving it in the B2, that any sort of residential development must have a commercial component to that, if it's to stay in the business.
Yes, it must have a commercial component, and actually in the B2, they can do 14 units per acre.
Okay, and so I drove by the property a few times, and it's quite small,
Yes.
right? And so when you were talking about looking at alternatives, like a commercial component in that space is a part of the reason, or perhaps the lack of perhaps desirability to put a commercial component in that space is part of the recommendation from the staff.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's approximately 680 feet from Richmond Road. It's behind the hotel. It was used as their tennis courts. So really, the viability of this being a commercial property is really slim.
Yes, and I do want to echo like the part about the parking concern that there was. I can see because there was a lot of on-street parking, and it's kind of tight back there with the
Yes.
other communities. But I think by adding the additional parking spaces within the community itself, I think that makes a lot of sense to alleviate that concern.
Yes, they're adding the additional parking spaces, and then there will be a no parking sign on the right-hand side. So there are 2 guest spaces on the right-hand side, and outside of that, there will be no parking on that right-hand side.
Okay, thanks. I have no more questions for the staff.
I have no questions other than what's already been asked. I have a few comments, and I'll wait till after the public hearing for that.
Okay.
I similarly have that same question for the applicant, but my only other, Tavia, for staff was I didn't see anything in the agenda around a sort of traffic analysis. And I know for 8 townhomes, maybe 16 or 24 cars that come with that, that may be too little of an impact. But Patriots Lane does effectively dead end after a couple residential developments. Was there anything done in the ways of the impact of traffic on that road?
No, you're correct. The fact that it was only 8 townhouses, and based on the calculation, it would only generate around 24 units. That's if everyone had 2 cars and then had guests. So there wasn't a traffic impact analysis done. That's really something that the director can request, and also the planning commission. And at the time, neither myself as a director or the planning commission thought it was warranted because of the size of the development.
Okay, I just bring up our last townhome consideration. That was a big, important piece, but that was of a scale.
Yeah, I think that was
significantly larger.
163
Right.
units.
Thank you. That was all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griffith.
Yes.
Okay, so I will open the public hearing, and I'll invite the applicant to come up first. Welcome, Mr. Getty.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm Vernon Getty of 1177 Jamestown Road. Pleasure to be here representing the applicant. Phil Victor is here with him, with us. This is John Hopke and I think Greg Warren from Land Tech Resources. I'll be uncharacteristically brief. Very brief history. Phil Richardson owned the Holiday Inn Patriot, built the Holiday Inn Patriot, and when he sold it, he subdivided this lot off in 2006. It's really not a viable commercial site. Evidence of that has been sitting there since 2006. I think this development makes the utmost sense. It's entirely consistent with the surrounding development and zoning, and I think we'll add some quality housing stock in a moderate price range to the city. So we would ask for you to approve it, and any of us would be glad to answer any questions you have of us.
But I think, Vice Mayor, you had a question, or Mr. Kern?
Yeah, could you talk about, are you far enough along in the project to talk about what a price range might be?
Not really. I asked the question before the meeting today. These are intended not to be, first-class luxury townhomes, but quality, sort of moderately priced townhomes. And I hate to even throw a number out, given what construction costs are doing, but, $300,000 ballparkish. I think that's the best we can do right now on price.
Okay.
That was my question as well.
Questions?
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Getty.
Great, thank you.
Would anybody else like to come forward to speak to this application? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council. I'll kick it off just to almost echo what we heard from the planning director and some of the comments here. It does strike me that this rezoning request would fit more in kind to what is around it in terms of the other housing units. It is not a commercially viable lot at .73 and kind of off the commercial corridor. And then as far as the removal from the CP district, I think there's merit in doing that as well. I was pleased to see that the ARB felt the same way, so I would be inclined to approve.
Yeah, I agree with the planning director's recommendation. I too have driven by the property, and it's a very small lot, has been mentioned. It's not viable for commercial property, but is actually also closer to Patriot condos than it is to the hotel. So I don't see any viable option for a commercial property there. So I think it's a good use of the property. As Mr. Getty pointed out, if it's been there since 2006, it's not generating any interest.
Yes, and I'll only add, echo what the Vice Mayor just said and the Mayor as well, and appreciate that also that even though it is a small space, it's not cramming, the highest density that even would be allowable in that space. And so actually scaling it back to 8, like being thoughtful about spacing and parking and of the surrounding area, which is quite high density in the townhomes and the other neighborhoods surrounding. I do think that this plan makes a lot of sense for the use of that space.
Thank you. Ms. Ramsey?
And I would concur with my colleagues' comments. I too drove out there and took a look around and agree about not only the commercial usage not really being fitting, but if I live there, I'd much prefer having a residential development sort of across the street as opposed to a commercial with people coming and going and lights and the whole bit. And I'm also pleased that they're going to have a driveway wide enough to accommodate a couple cars. We have heard that issue come up in other townhome developments, and so this is sort of meeting an issue before it occurs. And I also think that due to the location of this development and the design and type, that the price point, sort of what Mr. Getty said or thereabouts, will allow for some people who probably wouldn't be able to afford city residence to live in the city. And just lastly, since it's already multifamily with the other developments, I think this is very fitting.
Rogers?
As do I. I'll only maybe add on to the affordability piece. We've very purposely built up a trend in the city of some concessions from developers to have a nod towards affordable housing, usually reserved to be about 10% of their development. So examples might be the Castle Inn development at Governor's Inn, Castle development at Governor's Inn, or the what was proposed from Landmark Village. And so this unit did not, as mentioned, have a piece towards affordability at that same metric of 10% of units. At the same time, though, as the applicant's legal representative suggested, that level of cost in Williamsburg for townhomes is already itself affordable. We don't yet have much in the city options as far as the $300,000 range where everything's ultimately land for what could be achieved in Williamsburg. So I'm excited to support as well. I think it's in line with the use already residentially of that area. And again, we'll bring in a price point which is newer for the city.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's comments. Is there a motion?
Yes, I move that City Council approve PCR 22-023 to rezone property located at 252 Patriot Lane, parcel number 3908.055.668, from Corridor Business District B2 to Multifamily Dwelling District RM2, and to remove the property from the Corridor Protection District CP.
Second?
Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
Next public hearing is a public hearing, PCR number 23-018, for consideration and action regarding the request for a special use permit to operate a church on the third floor of the building located at 1006 Richmond Road. Ms. Griffin.
Yes, this is a request from Lawrence A. Reiger. He's a member of the Diocese of the Mid-Atlantic Charismatic Episcopal Church, and this is a request for a special use permit to operate a church on the third floor of 1006 Richmond Road. Here you see the property is located at the corner of Richmond Road and Matoaka Court. It is in what we know as the Wells Fargo building. Wells Fargo is on the first and second floor. The property size is approximately 0.796 acres, and the land use designation is mixed use, and the zoning is in our LB2 district. In this district, particularly if a church wants to operate or any type of religious organization, they must get a special use permit before the city council. Again, the church would only operate on the third floor. The third floor is approximately 2,789 square feet. The church is saying that they would be there for only 2 years, and this is a part of the conditions. They are looking for a permanent space somewhere in the region and have not found one quite yet. The hours of operation would be on Sunday from 9:30 to 12:30. There would be no outdoor events. They would have a small office as a part of the church for counseling. The small office is an allowable use, so it's not really a part of this special use permit process, but wanted to just tell you what would be going on there. And there will be no interior or exterior changes made to the building, except in the inside of the space, they are going to change the fluorescent lights to LED lights. Outside of the building, also, again, no changes are being made. There are approximately 48 parking spaces there already. They will only use the parking spaces at full capacity during their Sunday service. The zoning ordinance allows for 1 space for every 10 seats, so they have ample parking. And of course, with every special use permit, we have 6 criteria. And those 6 criteria, the first 3 are compatibility with the comprehensive plan, the intent and purpose of the zoning district, and then we want to make sure that the use will be in character to adjacent properties, neighborhoods, and existing and proposed development. And I'm going to spare you, I think I'm sparing you, I'm not sparing you. I am going through each of these. Comprehensive plan, it is designation as mixed use. We know that this corridor has a mix of uses, and this church would not change that or not degrade the Richmond corridor. It's also within the Arts and Cultural District. So we feel it is compatible with the comprehensive plan. In regards to the zoning district, we do believe that it is in keeping with the LB2 zoning district. They are going through the correct process and asking for the special use permit. And we also believe that it would not take away from any of the adjacent properties or any of the character of the neighborhood. The last 3 criteria is if the use is adequately serviced by essential public services. We know that it is. The building has been there since 1970s. The building or the use will also not result in the destruction or loss or damage to architectural, archaeological, or ecological features. And then we want to make sure the use is designed and sited and landscaped not to discourage any future development. Again, there's no changes that will be taking place on the outside of the building. They will get a sign later on, and that sign will have to go through the Architectural Review Board and be approved by the Planning Office. Staff does recommend approval of this special use permit. The Planning Commission also at their meeting recommended approval of this 7-0. We do suggest the following conditions, and I will read through these. The special use permit is only for the applicant and does not extend to another church. The operation of this particular church at this location will cease after 2 years from the date of the City Council approval. The special use permit is specifically for the 3rd floor of 1006. It will not extend or expand to the 1st or 2nd floor. The church will not hold meetings or gatherings outside on the premises, and the parking of the church participants will only be for the designated parking spaces on the premises at 1006 Richmond Road. This was approved at the Planning Commission level, and also the applicant agrees with all of these conditions. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and we do have representatives from the church here.
Good, thank you. Before I open the public hearing, any questions for the staff?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Griffin. One question is, as I was reading through this, if it's specific about the one Sunday service, if during the 2-year period they saw the need to expand services, how would they go about getting that approval?
So there's a section in the zoning ordinance that talks about changes to a special use permit. I don't have all the criteria memorized at this point, but we would look at those criteria, and if the criteria suggests that it can be administratively approved, it would. If not, it would have to go back through the Planning Commission and City Council to expand it to do anything outside of what you approved today.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Nor do I. Thank you. Very comprehensive.
Neither do I. Thank you.
Just a real quick question. I would imagine there'll be use on the 3rd floor, just administrative use, that type of stuff going on during the week.
Yes, yes, sir. And I didn't mention those because an office use is an allowable use within the LB2, so it wouldn't go before the Planning Commission or City Council either way.
Thank you. Okay. I will open the public hearing and invite the applicant to come, or anybody who'd like to come speak to this matter. Welcome, sir. Just identify yourself for the record, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I am Lawrence Rieger. I'm the Archdeacon for the Diocese of Mid-Atlantic and the Charismatic Episcopal Church. We are not new to here. I want to say we've actually been in Williamsburg as a church since 2004, nonstop for the last 10 years. We've either been in Kimball Theater or over on 1166 Jamestown Road. We're not what you would call a typical church. We are really focused on small groups and doing personal counseling. Father Michael and I both have served within the community. He was a police chaplain at William and Mary for many years. Both he and I, with military background, do volunteer work and teaching with ROTC here at CNU. We tend to deal with personal experiences, and my example would be is on Tuesday morning this week, I ran into a lady over at breakfast. I have a particular ministry dealing with military whose wives have breast cancer. I lost my wife to that. Military don't do well when they can't control circumstances. So this is the type of thing that we do, and this was, we actually, the guys at Fort Eustis, he'll be a widower fairly shortly, and so we opened up counseling. This is most of what we do is very small group, 2, 3, 5 people, and that's kind of what we do. So we're not going to interfere with anything going on. We have done permit changes before. In our last property, we went through it, nobody complained, no violations issued, and we don't cause traffic problems. So that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir. I appreciate you coming forward. Would anybody else like to come forward? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for comments. And I'll just say, I think, the ability to offer services such as that's been identified in this area is always a welcome thing. And so we're better else to host a church than near a neighborhood in close proximity to folks. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
Yeah.
No.
The only thing I would say is just a comment again about I appreciate the planning department putting together a very comprehensive package for us and thoughtful deliberation of the planning commission to sort of spell out the conditions, which were probably questions that a lot of us had. So that's all I wanted to comment.
Rogers?
And similarly, I have no qualms. It strikes me the time of busyness for the church would also fall during times in which the building is mostly vacant, given Wells Fargo is the main tenant there, and it's better than the vacancy we have, and certainly wish you all the best.
Is there a motion?
So I move that City Council approve PCR 23-018 with the following conditions. The special use permit is only for the applicant and does not extend to another church. The operation of the Diocese of the Mid-Atlantic Charismatic Episcopal Church at this location will cease after 2 years from the date of approval, today, September 14, 2023. The special use permit is specifically for the third floor of 1006 Richmond Road and does not expand to the first or second floor of the building. The church will not hold meetings or gatherings outside on the premises, and parking of church participants can only be within the designated parking area on the premises of 1006 Richmond Road.
Second.
Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
Thank you. Welcome. Takes us now to reports, and first we have our monthly financial statement. Director Dameron? You have to come every month.
I know. Well, this month I just have a few comments, but they do explain a few items on the report. And first, looking at revenues, general fund revenues, we actually appear to be in good shape. I will note that if you compare the current year total revenue to the previous year, we see a decrease first off of about $71,000, but you have to realize that we have two rather large revenue streams that timing difference. One of those is the Williamsburg Health Foundation grant that we've been fortunate to receive for human services. I did follow up on that, and while we did not receive it in August, it should have come in today, and so that will take care of about a $275,000 variance that we have. In addition to that, our 599 funds for public safety from the state have not yet been received. And if you look at the report, while we did receive it last year in August, in 21, it was a bit later coming in as well. So I think those will be forthcoming. We have not received them yet. But that brings our revenue total from the 2.5 up to about 2.9, somewhere in that range. So that accounts for some of that. I will also note Then in our other local taxes, you'll see an increase of $172,000 compared to last year. Part of that is in business license, the other part is in recordation. And then looking on page 9, which is one of my favorite pages of the report, actually. Of course, we don't have sales tax in yet. We won't be reporting on that for the current year until September. And our lodging tax, you'll note, we're close or in line with last year, but it is showing a slight decrease of about $11,000 or 2.6%. However, in meals, we're showing an increase compared to August of '22 of about $49,000, which represents a boy, that's a little print, 2.8% increase. And again, sales tax will be reported on next year, but in regards to the tourism fund on page 10, you'll see again, we're slightly below about $5,000 on the $2 lodging tax, but that $5,000 equates to almost 5%. So we'll continue watching that. We know that from year to year, those revenue streams don't always stay level. We'll continue to watch that. And then in the utility fund, our revenues are coming in consistent with what I would anticipate compared to the budget. And in terms of expenditures, they're in line with the budget, and the utility fund may be trailing just slightly below where we were last year. So that concludes my main points. I'd be glad to entertain questions if you have any.
I think you've done a good job explaining things, and it doesn't seem like there's a great deal of variance on anything.
No questions. Thank you, Ms. Dammer.
No questions?
Me, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Director Dammer. Okay, takes us to monthly departmental operating report, and this is my favorite. Who's in the barrel?
Yeah, we've got a sort of a special presentation today with a joint effort between IT and the fire department. So we'll let Mr. Barham take it away.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons, members of the City Council. Today, Chief Snyder and I, who's standing behind me, we're going to talk to you about something near and dear to everyone in this room, probably everyone in this area, cellular service, or its lack thereof. So briefly, just to talk about some of the issues that we've identified, and nothing on this list is going to surprise anyone. There's certainly a lack of quality cellular coverage across the city, the entire area. I'll let Larry speak to impacts of public safety.
Yeah, so outside of the anecdotal kind of results, if you will, that we see with the lack of cell phone coverage, we want to talk a little bit about the public safety impacts, and some of which council is already aware of. When Dominion Energy in 2019, we started the conversation with them when they were transitioning from the sirens to iPaws, which is the notification on phones. We had concerns about a lack of redundancy in the city. Subsequent results of the studies in 2020 in February, and then also in 2022 in June, realized some of the concerns that we had, that there were different areas where we know we had some cell coverage issues in which the iPaws didn't work. And so Dominion just transitioned to, in February 1st of this year, to an iPaws only notification system. So these sirens have been decommissioned, and we'll slowly start to see them removed from our community. So just the fact that we already know that we have some cellular issues from a notification standpoint for emergency management are important. And also for Chief Dunn and I, both in police and fire, for our MBTs, our motor data terminals, if you guys on our apparatus into their police cars, they rely on cellular coverage. And at times, even right now in the temporary tent for the fire department, the MDTs are not updated until we get out of the tent. It's going to be very much contingent upon our cellular strength and coverage, which again impacts some of that information. And so early on, it's actually in this year's CIP, and we're going to talk a little bit about it, are the cell phone on wheels. We had put $50,000 in, particularly from emergency management, because we've already seen some concerns with our large assembly events, July 4th, Grand Illumination, in which they're at times at capacity. If you've ever been to any of those events, sometimes it's hard to get a call through. And so we've tried to look at how do we overcome that and how do we augment that, and one of the answers for us was a cell phone on wheels to explore that in conjunction with an emergency management, that incident command structure. That also obviously has
a lot of other benefits to the city as well outside of EM. It certainly could post-disaster incidents in the event we lost cellular infrastructure. We could also utilize it for that and for some of the things that we're going to talk about today as we kind of look on how we can try to solve this cellular gap coverage.
So the service issues in the city across all vendors, there's some that are better than others, but everybody has their issues across the city. The city as an organization, we switched from Verizon to T-Mobile in September of '22. There was improvements. I think we could all agree that there was improvements to our coverage as an organization and our use of the cellular system. But certainly issues are still there. And then last and probably most important, just the consistent feedback that we get from residents about cellular coverage and cellular service issues within the city. So we've come up with a two-phase plan to hopefully address this. The first phase of this is going to be an RF propagation and mapping study, and that's a really big, fancy bunch of words to say we're going to have people drive the street and tell us by carrier how good or how bad the cellular service is in that particular area, and that will generate maps that they will then provide to us to then allow us to further this work. It says the costs for this are expected to be between $5,000 and $10,000. It actually came in a little less than $5,000. And then the second part of this plan is to purchase what's affectionately known as a COW, or a cell on wheels. It's essentially a mobile cell tower that you can just put wherever you want, connect it to the carrier's infrastructure, and that then improves the cell service in that particular area. So the RF study, our plan is to engage with Crown Castle. Crown Castle is a national company. They build infrastructure and then lease that infrastructure to the carriers. They're carrier agnostic. They don't really care. They're going to come and perform the study. Significant portions of this work have already been completed. They've done the same type of work for CW as well as William & Mary. They're going to allow us to utilize that work as part of our plans. Again, service mapping for Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T. The individual maps will show us where they're good, where they're not so good, where they can use some improvement. We'll be able to overlay those on top of each other to really get a really solid picture. We'll bring the results back to City Council. We're certainly willing to share with the carriers if they're interested at all. Then kind of the second part of this is for us to partner with, potentially, Crown Castle to build out this small cell infrastructure. What that could look like is poles connected to infrastructure hidden in the city right-of-way, behind the tree line. It could be attached to buildings, whatever the case may be. It would have to go through the potentially through planning and certainly through the planning department. But then allow them to build that infrastructure. It could be with Crown Castle, it could be with another vendor, or we could go it alone and do it ourselves. The infrastructure then, whoever builds it, whoever owns it, would then have the potential to lease that to the carriers. The carriers pay a fee for that to attach their cellular equipment to this infrastructure to then improve their cellular coverage in that particular area. The maps, while it's the study, the propagation study is so important because that will inform where these poles, where this infrastructure needs to be. A side benefit to the city is once the infrastructure is in place, we could then have access to it for our own smart city initiatives. If there's a particular area we'd like to do some environmental monitoring, or we need to hang some infrastructure for parking as an example, we would have the capability to do that. And last, Chief Snyder will talk about cows.
So, I've learned a lot in a very short amount of time about cellular on wheels because this is way outside of my wheelhouse, but no pun intended. But it's been interesting. So we just had some initial exploratory conversations with some different vendors. On the screen here are a couple of different pictures of what a cell on wheels could look like. The larger one is 106 foot. The one to the right that's a little bit smaller is an 80 foot. And at the end of the day, it's like a house or anything else. They're all customizable. It depends upon what we want, on how high we want them to be, and what the infrastructure needs to be. So particularly in the IT and Mark's world, what do we want to put into this thing to make it work? And so the initial cost that we have, which is based upon a 106-foot tower, is $30,000 to to purchase, or about $5,000 a month. So, and again, that's all contingent upon the infrastructure that we put on it, the different IT needs that Mark will identify that would be appropriate for our community. And so what we feel like from an EM standpoint is probably getting 2 of these would be beneficial for us. And really the break-even point is 6 months. So as we look at the propagation study and we look at our EM plans and how we want to provide some redundancy within our own community in terms of that world, that 6 months turnover is kind of where we're looking at, where it becomes more advantageous for us to purchase. We do have some initial vendor meetings later this month to continue to dive deeper into what the specifics and the details of these cell on wheels will be. And so as we get more of that information and we get more of those details, we'll continue to be more informed to really give a good recommendation to the city manager and then obviously ultimately the city council to determine what your direction is.
So that's it for the Larry and Mark show. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
You guys teamed together well, so thank you for that. And thank you all, applaud you for the efforts to look into the issue specifically as it relates to emergency management. And you know, I don't think I put it in perspective of how it affects you all and what you do to provide services to the city. So I see providing these cows, not City of Williamsburg, but whatever it stands for, something on wheels, would be a great benefit to us. I think doing the propagation study looking forward to seeing the results of that, and if that can help the carriers see some of the deficiencies in what they're currently providing and maybe even putting in their own infrastructure, that would be nice. Now, I recognize that they haven't been so willing to do so, and thus it's probably the number one complaint I get these days from folks. Even as I'm fussing, sitting in my office with one hand on a piece of metal, trying to make a phone call, it's tough. So better service and looking into how we might be able to participate in that moving forward is good. I say that, but I just want to remind everyone, it's not the city's job really to provide service for cell phones. That's kind of outside of our purview. It's really the carrier's responsibility. But if there's an opportunity to supplement that and provide a revenue stream, essentially, I think that then that would be something we should look into. So thank you for the report and look forward to the study. Seeing how this pans out. Pat?
Thank you. So question on the propagation study, and I'm visually, so you get this cell on wheels and you've determined that there's an area that needs additional coverage. How specific, I mean, there'll be a lot of options of where that tower can be and not have to be in a specific location to boost that tower, because you start thinking about where in the city can you put one of these cows that's going to be acceptable to everyone.
Sure. I think the map will certainly give us a lot of options. It doesn't, if you can imagine a heat map and there's a circular area where we know that cell phone coverage is not as good as we would like or expect, it doesn't have to go in the middle to improve the area. It just has to go in the general area, and more importantly, it has to have access to infrastructure to get to the carriers so that they can then bring that online on their networks. We've got a lot of fiber in the ground through various companies. Certainly Chantel being in town and Glow Fiber is going to help out a lot with that, but Cox is here, as is Lumos and Segra. We can connect to that. But no, I agree that the area in which it's going to go will have to be agreed upon and be something that's acceptable to everyone.
I think Lafayette and Page, I don't need a propagation study because it'll drop your call every day.
We could all name a few areas, I'm sure.
Thanks.
I don't really have any questions. I think I have a lot to learn. That was a lot of information, but kind of getting a better understanding of kind of some of the technical aspects of this. Obviously, I experience what everyone has talked about and certainly hear from residents about this issue. But I just want to sort of echo what the mayor says, that like, cellular service and having it is not the city's responsibility. It really is on the carriers. But I just want to commend the city staff for really looking at this issue and saying, yes, that this may not really be so much of like what we, are obligated to do, but really thinking of like, nonetheless, we have real concerns as a city and real concerns as city residents, everything from a slight, annoyance to real critical times where calls need to get through and messages need to get through. So I just really want to commend the city staff for, not just sort of saying like, hey, that's not us, and really thinking about how can we solve this problem. And so I really do appreciate the work that's been done thus far, and I look forward to learning more and seeing how it all moves forward. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. To sort of echo, I think all of us, personally think of drop cell service as far as not being able just to make a phone call without really considering the impacts it has on public safety, whether it be with the fire and for the police. So thank you specifically for bringing that to our attention. So just a couple sort of in the weeds questions on the study. So will people go out and check the bars on their phone, or will they make phone calls? Can you hear me? Okay.
Essentially, yes. They'll have, a little more advanced equipment within their vehicles, but they're effectively driving the streets, measuring signal and cell quality from all three carriers to determine, who's good, who's bad. They will make phone calls. All of that information will be part of the report.
And any idea on the length of time to do this study?
I think it's going to be fairly quick.
Okay.
Once we give them the go-ahead, because and a lot of it too stems from the fact that a lot of the work,
It's already been done.
a large portion of the city's been done through Colonial Williamsburg and William and Mary.
And for the cows, the cells on wheels, what is the range of them? Because let me just back up. I look at this as sort of three steps. There'd be the study, then the poles, which would be permanent or semi-permanent, and then the wheeled vehicle, which would be temporary. So it would move around, and so the question then, what would be the range of it?
So the answer, I guess the correct answer is it depends.
Okay.
We're going to do some GIS work to figure out how high we need to be because we want to be above the tree canopy. And then it really gets down to the equipment that's attached to it and the power that it has. I think generally it's 300 to 500 feet, something like that, for one of these cows is the generally accepted range for that.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for putting together this nice presentation.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good first episode of the Mark and Larry show. I liked that. I had a question about the cows particularly. So it said $5,000 to rent per month and then $30,000 to purchase. So that break even would be after 6 months, more worthwhile to purchase. That just strikes me like a short timeline for trying to solve a long-term solution. Are these cows meant to be in place for a long period of time, or are they just meant for increasing cell service for emergency management services? In a short period of time, that is.
My experience with the cows in general have always been emergency managed base, which has been temporary things. So I've been on deployments where we've had to push them up in terms of an area with no cell coverage. So a very limited time frame. And speaking with one of the vendors who to help us kind of get some ideas and some details on the cows, I think there's some applicability for a more long-term solution. Certainly, they're not a permanent solution by no means. But to dive really into your question, I don't have a specific time frame on how long they typically would be in place. If Mark has anything you want to add to it.
I would say that, if as an example, if we put a cow in a particular area to improve that cell phone service in that particular area, it takes time for Crown Castle, us, whoever the vendor happens to be, to bring in, install, get the infrastructure there, and then to lease that space back out to the carrier. So the cows can be a very good temporary solution for emergency management. We have large events or whatever. They can also be somewhat of a long-term solution just to improve that cellular service while we wait for the more permanent infrastructure to come online.
Right, yeah, and that second part was kind of what I was questioning, because I doubt Verizon and AT&T are going to solve cell service in Williamsburg on Lafayette and Page Street in the next 6 months, right? And I wouldn't want these to degrade over 6 months and then be unusable after that half-year period. So sounds like there is some applicability in the long term, and so we'll be able to benefit past just a half year.
Absolutely.
Great. All right, thank you all.
And
Go ahead.
no, mine was, would there be opportunities to sort of share or partner with Colonial Williamsburg and William and Mary for some of their larger events with these cows?
I don't see why not.
And it's actually one of their more popular uses is when you have an event and you have a crowd of folks that you don't normally have in town, the demand on the resources, including cellular networks, is such that it can't meet the demand. And so lots of times organizations, private entities, even governments will bring in cellular on wheels devices to augment what the normal carrier flow is so that everybody that's at the event has access to the network. So I think that's exactly what the intent would be, and we would use it as often as the situation demanded.
Could we move it into Kaplan Arena for basketball games?
It sounds like Pat was volunteering his front yard, so.
And when you talk about streets, you're going in neighborhoods and everything, not just the corridors?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, thank you.
So just as we were talking through this from an emergency management standpoint, obviously we can't be the only locality in the country that's dealing with cell service issues. So are maybe there grant opportunities out there for this type of structure since it is an issue for everyone?
Absolutely. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to look in the EM world with, your experience as well to see what we can do to help augment the finances for it. We're trying to work with Dominion Energy and some other local partners to see what we can do to kind of offset the cost. So I think that there's a really good opportunity for us to explore some grants that help offset the cost without a doubt.
Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions? Looking forward to the results. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, city manager's report.
None today.
Okay then. City attorney?
Nothing right now.
Okay. Takes us now to open forum, which is an opportunity for anyone in the audience to come forward and address council on any matter that is on their mind. Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Janelle Krupika, and I'm a resident on 106 Indian Springs Road. I'm also a senior at William & Mary, and I'm here today to bring your attention to a pedestrian safety issue on Jamestown Road. So every day, students cross Jamestown Road from the surrounding neighborhoods, like where I live on Indian Springs, to get to class. However, there's no crosswalk anywhere on Jamestown Road in between Ucrop Way and Carey Street. This is 0.3 miles missing a crosswalk. This is a major inconvenience, but it's also a serious safety issue. There are numerous students and residents and faculty jaywalking across Jamestown Road between Carey Street and Ucrop Way every day. Richmond Road has 9 crosswalks that span the length of campus, but Jamestown Road has only 5. The recent renovation of Phi Beta Kappa means that there will be increased foot traffic across Jamestown Road as residents, students all go to new events happening at Phi Beta Kappa. There are also a number of other new buildings, such as the Integrated Science Center. There's going to be a new renovation of the Muscarel, new dorms, all happening in that same corridor between Ucrop Way and Carey Street that has no crosswalks. Not only is this dangerous, it's also an accessibility concern for mobility impaired and visually impaired individuals. So I am urging you to prioritize pedestrians through new crosswalks in between Ucrop Way and Carey Street on Jamestown Road. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming forward with your concern.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come forward? Seeing none, I'll close the open forum and move on to unfinished business, of which there is none. And takes us to new business, and first is the consideration and authorization for the city manager to execute a contract for a feasibility study regarding the potential of operating an independent school system. Mr. Trivett.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We're excited to move into the next phase of study work, and that includes, hopefully, the council's approval today of bringing on a study team that I think is excellently well-qualified and experienced to answer the various questions that we need answered in order to really consider the issue of an independent school district in the city. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jeff Smith to come forward. I think he's got a brief presentation on what he and his team plan to do for us.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Yeah. Welcome, sir. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And so let me begin by saying certainly to the mayor and Mr. Mayor and Vice Mayor and members of City Council and City Manager, good afternoon. I will admit and say to you that with my opening remarks that while I may have experienced some success in various aspects of my personal and professional life, I must admit that I am failing miserably at settling into retirement life. So on a more serious note, and to provide really context for my brief time with you today, let me really begin by expressing my appreciation for the opportunity to provide a brief overview of the scope of work to be completed by the Research and Feasibility Study Team. As you're aware, if approved, I will serve as the senior advisor to the study team. I think it is important for me to share with you that the members of the study team, beyond the senior advisor, collectively bring with them over 200 years of combined successful experience in K-12 public education. And so I am humbled by the opportunity to really collaborate with such a well-respected team in terms of experts in the field of education, all of whom I have had the opportunity and really the pleasure of working with in some professional capacity. It is also important for me to say from really the onset of this overview that the goals and the objectives have really been clearly defined by the city manager and his leadership team, and the proposal has been framed accordingly. And so I think what might also be of particular interest to the members of council and certainly to the broader community, and that is for me to highlight the limitations of this study. If selected to really conduct your study, we understand and appreciate the role of the Research and Feasibility Study Team to provide artifacts, documents that will objectively inform the city manager's recommendation to you as a council regarding the feasibility of an independent school division. While at the same time, we recognize that it is certainly not the intent of the consulting team to determine if a separation of a jointly operating school division should occur. We recognize and respect the responsibility of the administration and the governance body of this city, and we also realize certainly that you as a team in terms of governance and the administration, that you have not delegated that authority to the team. So we will work within the context of what has been provided for us. So I want to just really start off with what I think is the North Star for the study team. And I think I'll go back if I can. I think I'm advancing. So here we go. This is my first test to see if you would like to select us. How about that? I think I'm so this is really the North Star for us, and I think this is important, and that is the context for the work, to really recognize that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, as Nelson Mandela said. And so for us as a team, it is to understand that education is so fundamental, and how we provide and what we provide in terms of a high quality education for all learners. And so please know that we will embrace as a team, and we recognize the importance of the work. The next area for us, and that is to recognize for us, our process includes a holistic approach, and that is understanding the interconnectedness of all of the components and the parts. To know that the curriculum, the instruction, the assessment, the budget process, student enrollment, staffing, all of those components are connected. And so as a team, we will recognize, and you will get that as a part of this study. Also, members of the team, we bring with us current and innovative perspectives. All of us have had opportunities to work in various locations, and we have had various roles in K-12 education, human resources, serving as superintendent, working with Ford Next Generation Learning, presented at various state and national conferences. And so there also, I think it's important to understand and recognize that as a team, we will bring state and national connectivity to be able to reach out to other partners to weigh in as it relates to this study. And then research-driven and the depth there. Each member of the team, all of the leaders on the team have had an opportunity, and they've successfully completed the dissertation and earned their doctorates at various institutions of higher learning. And so context there is so important. So we respect that of the research aspect of this, and we're committed to that. And then the experience as a team as well. So the leadership experience of the consultant team, some of which I've had an opportunity to highlight already, and that is school superintendents. You will have at least 3 school superintendents who are now retired, so previous in a former life, but individuals who have served as school superintendents. And then K-12 classroom teacher experience, K-12 building administrator, administrative experience, school counselor, curriculum instruction assessment, central office administrators as well, chief financial officer, which is so important to this study, human resources administrator, Ford Next Generation Learning school coach and superintendent coach. So the concept of bringing into play some of the thinking and how that might influence in terms of at the national level and the innovation there. When we think of preparing young people to be college, career, and life ready, workforce development, earning, whether they earn other certificates in terms of industry certifications as a part of the journey, and perhaps that of earning an associate degree while in high school, and so forth. So again, the perspective of knowing at a national level and that innovation. And then individuals who have served and who are currently serving as executive leadership coaches and professional learning leadership experience as well. And then on the team, we will have someone with the athletic and extracurricular central office experience and higher education as we move forward. And then understanding your needs, we have had the pleasure to review the scope of work and what you expect, especially in terms of the leadership team, the city manager and the leadership team. And so here, just at a very high level, to really point out the K-12 research and feasibility study goals, and that is really to conduct a comprehensive study, and that is to evaluate the potential of establishing an independent school division. And so we will include various aspects that the city manager and the leadership team of the city of Williamsburg, certainly city council, will be able to weigh in on as a part of the design. And then for us to explore innovative K-12 education models for improved pathways to higher education and certificate programs, some of which I have mentioned earlier, whether that's industry certifications or earning an associate degree while in high school, at least during that high school year. And we have experience where young people have earned an associate degree their 12th grade year with dual enrollment credits, and the success and the power of that. And so we will take all of that into consideration as a part of the design. Collaborative approach, We recognize as a team that you cannot accomplish this in isolation and working in silos, and so certainly as appropriate, the collaboration with City Council, City Manager, and the leadership team, parents and students, community leaders, and others as determined by the City Manager and the leadership team here in the city of Williamsburg. And then the K-12 research and feasibility study objectives, and looking and examining the deliverables. And here you have the deliverables, certainly artifacts we will have, and also various documents to support the work, and that you will be able to weigh through. And then it is that of the report elements. You should expect the process in terms of a mission statement. We anticipate that this will involve identifying the portrait of perhaps a City of Williamsburg graduate, and then as that serving as a backwards design to say, then what would the mission statement consist of if we understand the portrait of what a graduate would look like if you have an independent school division. So it's using that backwards design and that approach to really focus on the development of a mission statement. So it's a bit more comprehensive than just weighing in with the verbiage, but let's identify the portrait first and use that as context and for going forward in building the mission statement. And then evidence of support, State Department of Education process. Certainly we will examine the curriculum and instructional design and provide evidence there, enrollment, and other services, and certainly the role of higher education, whether that's the 2-year institution or 4-year, and what that role might look like. And then the governance and management structure, employment terms and conditions. We have a human resource specialist as a part of the team, and then the financial feasibility of it as well. And then you see the other items listed, work products in terms of study completion, co-curricular activities and sports. We have someone on the team who has experience, extensive experience, as it relates to co-curricular activities and sports. And so we'll design and set forth what that might look like as well, and how you might scale that should you move in the direction of an independent school division. And then special education and English as a second language learning environment and the environments there. So we plan, if approved, to really begin this work this month, and then the expected completion date is January of 2024. Mr. Mayor, with that, I certainly will open it up for any specific questions that you or members of council may have at this time.
Well, Dr. Smith, thank you for being here, and I guess first I feel like I owe you an apology for getting the city manager to pursue you so doggedly to get you to agree to do this.
I said no twice.
Your failure in retirement should be our gain, and clearly, by your presentation and everything that I've heard about you and read about you, is an outstanding. Will be an outstanding contribution to this thought process that the city has undertaken. And the fact that you've brought on other people with specific expertise in all the components that you've outlined in this need for a feasibility study, I think really speaks to the credibility of this process that council's undertaking. And I thank you for mentioning that it's not your job to make the decision. That job falls solely on this body up here and our communications with the community, which we intend to have once we get that feasibility study in. I believe that the ask and what was presented to you is pretty comprehensive.
It was.
I suspect that whatever may have been missing in that RFP, so to speak, you were able to supplement with your own experience. Good, okay. So I don't have any specific questions. Thank you for being willing to be here today, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and I don't have any questions right now, but obviously your experience and knowledge is going to be beneficial to this study and the team that you've put together to cover all aspects of what an independent school system might look like. And one of the things that I wrote down from your presentation was potential, because there's still a lot, even if this study comes back and says it's feasible, there's still a lot of decision-making for this body. So it's a potential, whereas in some conversations, it's already been projected as a separation where we don't have the information to make that decision, and that's what your work is going to do, is provide that information for us. So thank you for taking on the challenge for us.
Yes, thank you. I'm not going to have any specific questions today either, because, once we start with the specific questions, we could be here for a very, very long time. And that will come out, I'm sure, over time. I just want to say from the jump here that I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate so much about what has been in your presentation, especially some of the elements of the study, and appreciating seeing that expertise in co-curriculars and athletics and special education English language learners, like really thinking about all, as you said early on in your presentation, about all learners and all types of passions and needs that different members of our community may have. And so I'm very, very excited and pleased to see that as outlined in your presentation. So thank you so much for being here. There's obviously nothing, as you said, more important than this. And so for us to do our due diligence and to do it well, we need the best people to do this. And I feel confident looking at the members of your team that really is an extraordinary group. So thank you, and we look forward to working with you over the course of the next several months. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ramsey?
Yes, thank you for being here. I don't have too much to add other than your passion for education comes out, and even in retirement, you want to do the best that you can to help educate our students of all types. So I really appreciate the fact that you, like I, failed in retirement, and there is life after.
It's a good thing to do.
It is. It's good. So thank you again.
Dr. Smith, thank you as well. I'll echo for taking on this challenge. It's really clear that you are the right man for the job, and it's something that I think I knew early on. I got the chance to look at your CV, and that is extensive. Your successes speak for themselves, but just in seeing this presentation too, it's clear that the team you've assembled, the time you've been willing to dedicate to this, is exactly what we need. And best example I found from that was some of the questions I've gotten since our announcement of commissioning this feasibility study is, what would a smaller school system like for the co-curriculars and athletic opportunities for students? And that is directly addressed. So is special education, right? So is English as a second language. So I so appreciate you really denoting that these are some of the issues that you plan to look into. So thank you. I wish you the best of luck. And maybe lastly, we'll just note that I appreciate you putting an end to that timeline and shooting for January of 2024. I'll be on the edge of my seat for that recommendation, as I know we all will be. But I also just want to make sure that the public's aware that there will then be opportunities for that public comment. And that feasibility study is provided to us and the public for their own partaking in this process of providing their feedback. And of course, as it's been mentioned too, this is a study that may tell us, yes, feasible, maybe not feasible, but at that point, council will then take on the decision of, is this something that we can pursue? And that's something that we'll need your report to guide us on, but obviously no decision has been made until that expert advice of yours lands in our hands. So thank you very much for all the time you and your team will put in on this.
No, it has been a pleasure, and we look forward to the journey ahead. And at the end of the day, we all have the same mission, and that is, how can we best serve young people to ensure that all young people have the opportunity to succeed. So thank you for your commitment, and also the commitment of your city manager. It has been my pleasure to get to know him as well. So thank you.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Smith. Okay. Action we need to take? Yes.
Yes. So I move that City Council authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Dr. Jeffrey O. Smith and his team in an amount not to exceed $135,000 to complete a feasibility study regarding the potential of operating an independent school system.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Thank you. We're looking forward to this next step. Okay, next, item B is consideration and action regarding the contract to replace the city's network infrastructure. Mr. Barham?
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons, members of City Council. The city maintains an extensive network to interconnect all city employees to devices, systems, and services across 8 locations that allow them to do their jobs. Additionally, many of these systems and services are used by citizens of Williamsburg to get information or interact with their government in many ways. These devices are vitally important to the success of the city. The current infrastructure was installed 7 years ago, and it has reached the end of its useful life. Additionally, several of these devices have begun to fail, and it requires my department to implement workarounds and patches to keep everything up and running. The department has worked with the vendor that performed the initial installation 7 years ago to determine the appropriate upgrade path. The new devices will allow for increases in speed as well as provide for improvements in the area of cybersecurity. The vendor, Virginia Integrated Communications of Virginia Beach, has provided us with an agreement to purchase all necessary equipment and perform the configuration and installation of the upgraded network. The total value of this agreement is $179,249.95, and it is budgeted in the FY24 CIP. So the staff recommendation is that the City Council authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with Virginia Integrated Communications for $179,249.95 to purchase and install networking equipment. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barham. Can you talk in layman's terms a little bit more about what is it? What are network devices, and what does that really mean to the layperson?
So all of these, the buildings, we'll talk, the facilities themselves are all connected. So this building, the new fire station, the police station, is all connected back to the municipal building. These are the devices that connect everything in each building, but then also connect it back to the main network. So every computer, every wireless access point, every printer, every server, every application, anything that requires access to employees, to citizens, to the internet, these devices are what makes that happen.
That's helpful. Thank you.
So,
Vice Mayor?
I know you mentioned you're over, the 7 years is beyond the lifespan.
Right.
So what do you project now that the next time you'll have to make these infrastructure changes for IT?
I think generally they happen every 6 to 7 years. We try to go longer. However, as they start to fail, that becomes a pretty good indicator that it's time. And we've had them fail in this building. We've had them fail in the municipal building as well.
And I have to say, on a side note, Mark continues his strategy. His strategy always was to present when there's a fire department piece of apparatus on the agenda. His looks really cheap.
I did not talk to Ms. McKay before the meeting to get me behind the fire chief. So this is new, uncharted territory for me.
Well, my only question is, how long does this change, how long does it take to make the replacement?
Once we get everything in, it'll be over the course of about a week. We'll strategically start looking at individual locations, swap those out, bring everything back up, and then go by facility.
Oh, okay, great.
Not long.
Thank you. And as far as you commented in here particularly about cybersecurity, and we all know that the bad guys out there are always trying to attack. Right. So will this company provide upgrades, particularly in the area of cybersecurity, as part of the contract as well?
So the upgrades come in within the equipment. If you think about the 7 years in technology is a long time in terms of advancements in technology. The advancements that we're going to be able to recognize within the area of cybersecurity are going to be baked into the equipment itself. So it's based on configuration. Once we get the equipment in, they have all these new capabilities that we can then configure and use within our own environment.
Okay, so then you'll sort of go in and tweak as you need to thwart.
Absolutely. To the best of my ability.
Okay. So help you God, right? Thank you.
Director Barham, thank you. Outside of what's been asked, no additional questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Any action? What is the action?
So Mark took the words right out of our mouths, so I will just reiterate that I move that City Council authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with Virginia Integrated Communications for $179,249.95 to purchase and install networking equipment.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Next on the agenda is the consideration and action to purchase smart water meters to move towards a smart monthly billing and fixed-based reading collections. Mr. Reeser, I have to admit, I didn't hardly recognize you.
Not something you'll normally see me in, no.
Right. You're not even
thank you,
going
Mr.
to a
Mayor.
wedding.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. As you said, I'm here today to talk to you about the water meters and the city system. We're scheduling a change out, going from a touch read system to a radio system. This is part of the city's GIOs for smart city initiatives. I brought a few of the tools with me from the job. Let's see. There we go. So we're going to try and convert from touch read to radio read. So I want to go through a little bit of the history of where we've been, where we've started. A lot of this has to do with my history because I can only go back to 1990. That's when I started with the city as the meter reader, and where we've progressed. From 1990 to 2003, when I started reading meters, we used a very manual way of logging the readings. We'd had to visually read the meters, enter the readings into the book, and then pass the book into the finance department for data entry for billing. This usually took about a little over 2 weeks for two men to do the reading. One man would read the meter, the other person would log the reading. And if you've seen my penmanship, you can see there could be some issues with misreads and human error. In about 1994, we started going to a touch read type meter. The meter reader would take an interrogation wand like this. A pit pad is affixed to the lid of the meter pit or vault, and you would touch this wand. At first, we would just get a visual reading off of this and then still have to enter it into the book. So it was a better way to read the meter because if you've ever seen a water meter in a box, they can be difficult to read. So this helped assisted with that. And in about 1998, we got rid of the books, fired those into a handheld device similar to this one. So when the meter reader would touch the pad with the wand, the reading would go directly to this. This would get turned into the billing department, and all the information would be downloaded into the billing system. In about 1999, we committed to a full change out to go totally to radio, get rid of all the visual meters, manually read, and go solely to touch read. In about 2003, we completely changed out. There was 2,500 meters that needed to be changed out at that time. And this is just a little of the accolades that we received when we completed that change out. The change out was done all in-house. Staff completed it. We originally had a 5-year goal, and we completed it ahead of schedule by several months. And the total cost of this project was around $350,000 at the time. A couple of the employees you see there are still here, not that they look anything similar to that anymore. And hopefully this next go-around we'll have somebody else in that pit. There we go. So where we are currently. So since 2003, when we completed the change out, we've just been maintaining the touch read. As they go bad, we replace them just as normal maintenance and operation until about 2011. About 2011, we started integrating a radio feed type meter. These are the first two generations of what we were integrating into the system. These still go into the same handheld, but these just send out a radio signal. They're constantly sending out, every 4 seconds, they'll send out that reading in just a pulse. And as you come by with this device, it collects it and gets the meter number and the reading. In about 2014, we committed to a complete change out. preface that. We were still using touch read meters when we were integrating the other radio feed meters. And in 2014, we committed going solely towards radio. The first complete subdivision that we changed out was Holly Hills. The reason we chose that subdivision because the size of the lots and the distance between meters, it made it much more sense for the meter reader to be able to just drive through there collecting the readings instead of having to get in and out of the truck each time, walk up to the meter, so it saved a lot of time. In 2015, we started requiring nothing but the E-coder meters. They were the one meters in our spec. We've been using Neptune meters basically since I've been with the city. We found the quality of their product and just a good overall meter to go with. And then in 2020, we upgraded our water standards to go with the new ProCoder. This is a new type of meter. It still has the radio signal, but as you can see, it has an analog dial instead of the digital dial. The first two generations, what we'd run into is sometimes those displays would go bad. So you'd either have to send that register to the manufacturer to collect the readings if you couldn't get it to wake up. With a new analog, even if it stops sending the signal, you can still get the reading off the meter. So how we'd like to proceed with the change out, if you have authorized it, we'd like to start with the commercial meters first. There's about 877 meters in the system, and about 600 of those need to be changed out to radio feed. The reason I like to start with the commercial meters is because they are already read monthly. Excuse me. So by getting those changed out, it just speeds up the process for the meter reader. As far as the change out itself, the intent is to change out all 5/8 and 1-inch size meters. Anything larger than 1 inch, we would be changing out just through registers. The reason for that is because with the larger size meters, you can actually change out the measuring element of the meter. So on the smaller meters, the register is the bulk of the cost, so it doesn't make much sense to just change registers on those. These are the residential districts. Once we've completed the commercial meters, I would like to proceed with the East Residential. The reason I would choose that area first is because it's already about 60% complete. So we're just going for the low-hanging fruit there. And then we just proceed through the downtown residential and western residential. The color coding is basically the 3 quarterly billings that we use. So those are the 3 zones that we read each quarter. The advantages to going to radio, we're replacing a touch read system that's reached its life expectancy. A lot of these meters are nearly 20 years old. Standard typically says meters 15 to 20 years is when you typically would be doing a change out, but nobody really specifies. It's the useful life. It gives us faster, more accurate readings. Going to radio, there's no human error to it. It's all just digitally coming over and goes into the billing system. If we decide to go to monthly billing, monthly billing has its advantages, as you all know and had it discussed. It eases the burden of increasing bills, gives you the ability to catch water leaks sooner, and it increases communications between the utility and the residents. We have data logging capabilities with these meters. These meters collect data every 15 minutes and then once an hour. Just collects to see if there's any usage going through the meter and how much it is. This is good so when somebody complains of a high bill, you can explain, well, you had water going through your meter at 2 o'clock in the morning. Maybe you have a toilet leaking or something like that. And this falls in line with the GIOs for the Smart City initiatives. And eventually, if we do go to a fixed base reading collection, we wouldn't have to send anybody out in town to read the meters. They could all be just collected straight from the office and all the information downloaded. Once we go, if we do decide to go to a fixed base collection system, that would also give residents some opportunity to actually see their consumption live. I would be happy to answer any questions from there.
Thank you, Mr. Reeser. So that's 33 years.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For your long service to the city. We appreciate that. Do you see any cost savings to the city as a result of going this route?
Cost savings, we can reutilize personnel that we already have. Right now, for him to read the meters, as I believe I had said, it takes about 3 weeks. So that's one person who's tied up for 3 weeks. Once we go to radio, whether we go to the fixed base data collection or a drive-by system, he'll be able to read these meters within a day or two. James City County did their change out in 2019, I believe it was. And they currently have 3 people reading water meters. They have 30,000 meters, and they get them read in 3 days. So it's
Did you say what the life expectancy of this new technology is?
it's pretty much typical. Its standard is about 15 to 20 years is what they expect.
That's all the questions I have, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, and one similar question was about the maintenance of the new meter. Obviously, it must be less than the older style meters. And then the second question was the accuracy of the new meters.
When they come from the factory, they are tested to meet within a standard. I believe the parameters, they have to be at a minimum of 98.5% accurate up to, like, I think 101% accurate. We've seen through the course of changing meters and stuff, you don't lose a whole lot of accuracy on the smaller meters. You can see them down to like 95, 94%, which is not bad, but it can always be improved.
Yeah, well, thank you for the presentation and your work on this project, because obviously, as you stated, it's going to save time where those workers could be designated for other work instead of just reading meters. Thank you.
My only question was about timing of the change out, so that you had the map of the different zones of the residential zones. How long does that projected to take?
For us to in-house do the complete change out, I'm thinking it's going to take about 1.5 years to 2 years. Because we do have other duties to do also. We're a fairly small department, and I plan on breaking us up into teams. There'll probably be, on good days, I'd probably have 3 teams of two people each going out to changing the meters. So we should have the project done within 2 years, be my guess. We have about, like I said, a total of 2,600 meters or so to change.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I never knew there was so much involved with the water meters. And just as a follow-up to Stacy's question, so I assume that would a neighborhood be notified when their meter is going to be changed out? And
Yes, ma'am.
do you ever have problems accessing the water meter? I mean, like behind fences or anything like that?
Yeah, those things can happen. Typically, what we would do in a situation like this where we're doing a complete change out, we'll go neighborhood by neighborhood. So, excuse me, a few days in advance, we'd be putting out flyers letting people know. When we get on site, typically we'll knock on the door, letting the resident know that we are here. Just in case, they're doing laundry or something like that, we can come back at another time. Access to the meters can be tricky at times. There are some neighborhoods that they're actually under decks behind fences. A lot of those have already been changed out. So we've been proceeding through this. Like I say, we first changed out Holly Hills subdivision, but we've also done Shella Square, Westgate condominiums. We've done the restored area, Port Ann. So those neighborhoods have already been changed out.
And obviously, if this is approved, any new construction would go with these new meters and system.
Yes, ma'am.
And just to clarify, when you talk about drive-by, so you could just drive by someone's house and it'll record the reading there?
Yes, ma'am. Very, very similar to how Dominion Power and Virginia Natural Gas read their meters. Most of them don't have to get out of their truck. They just drive by because, like I say, the meter is constantly sending a signal every 4 seconds, and it's just waiting for something to collect it.
And then when you talked about the fixed base collection, I don't know what that is.
What it is, they have base units that actually can collect the radio signal that's being transmitted. So when we get to about 80% changed out, we can have Neptune or Core and Main, who's our distributor, they'll come out and they'll do a survey of the town, and they'll see how many and where the best locations are for these fixed base units. And then it's basically just a touch of a button in the billing department.
Okay. And then one last thing, I noticed on your map that you had some sections in both York County and James City County. And so some residents may not realize that we provide water to those parts of the county.
Yes, that's correct.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Reeser, thank you for the presentation, really detailed. I also personally appreciate the historical look back rather than just, here's the new tech and here's what we're doing. Could you help educate me on what goes into replacing one of the meters? Is it
One of the
just
meters?
unclipping and reclipping? I mean, what's that process like?
Sounds like you might be volunteering to help out.
See, I mean, bring coveralls and
We
might
need
have to
somebody
do a
in the
little
pit.
digging and that kind of stuff. Typically, I mean, the majority of our water meters are all in pits under the ground. So a lot of times you'll have to pump water out, have to dig because dirt can get into them. You have to dig the dirt out. But then basically it's just shutting off a valve that is in the pit. And then some meters you have to use pipe wrenches to change. And then some, in some of our newer boxes, they have a compression wheel where it's just a wheel expands and compresses against the edges of the meter or the inlet and outlet of the meter and creates that seal. Of course, the last time we did the change out, there were some valves that got broken and things like that. So there's some other things that can happen taking place.
That's what I was curious about, 2,600 meters to replace if there was a potential for causing a leak or an accidental crack of a line, and I'm sure your team will mitigate that, but there must be some additional risk.
Sure. Typically what you'll see, not so much broken lines or things like that, but sometimes when you're changing the meter, sediment can get into the line. We try and mitigate that by opening the outside hose bib or having the resident open it like a bathtub and let that flush out. But sometimes that doesn't always work, so it can get into some of your smaller fixtures like a kitchen sink or bathroom sink. And sometimes you just have to take the screens off for the resident, clean that out. There have been times where we've had to replace kitchen faucets because it just got so bad that it failed.
Well, I'll help if I can. I actually used to do meter readings for an old job I had, and I remember having to reach through pooled water to clean off the screen so I could even read it. So I've literally gotten hands dirty for it. It's important work. And actually, within just the last week, I had questions, a new homeowner in the area, about what's my meter being read at, what's the potential cost of water. And so I just want to commend your team for how responsive you all were. Immediately, someone was sent out, and actually your team, it was Lisa Wake, did the math for me and saying, here's what you've read so far, so here's over the quarter what you could be spending. And that was just so helpful. So I obviously recognize that sending someone, a personnel out to do one reading, just, for any homeowner, I was just reaching out through the normal systems, can get tedious. So I'm excited to support this. I see how it can be very helpful. But I also appreciate the work you all have done in helping people read their meters thus far.
Great, thank you.
Well, Mr. Reeser, thank you. You did a great job. We should see you at the podium more often.
Yeah, he has props. This was awesome, yeah.
Well, we'll see how well you did. Is there a motion?
Yes, so I move that City Council authorize the city manager to execute purchase orders for approximately 2,660 Neptune Procoder R900i smart water meters and registers to complete the conversion to radio reading and transition to monthly billing and full advanced metering infrastructure.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
Thank you. Did well. Okay, next item D is consideration and action on proposed resolution 23-10 to apply for the FY 25-26 Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program funds for the Collegewood Circuit Trail. Mr. Small, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm back again. 2 years ago, I brought to you a resolution for the Collegewood Circuit. This is our second round on trying to get funding for this project. The last time we were funded about $586,000 in FY 23-24 Transportation Alternatives Funds. And so now we're asking for the rest of the money in this round of funding. This is what I affectionately call the Berkeley to Berkeley Trail along Strawberry Plains Road and John Tyler Lane, from Berkeley Middle School down to Berkeley Lane. And will be a 10-foot wide shared use path. It'll help form a loop around the South College Woods, Lake Matoka, and William and Mary campus, hence our name of the College Woods Circuit. Our first phase of this project was originally known as the Monticello Trail, which has been built. So that's kind of phase 1 of the circuit, and phase 2 will be this one that'll take us down to Berkeley Lane. Phase 3 will eventually close the loop down John Tyler Lane and Jamestown Road all the way to College Corner. And then we will have bicycle and pedestrian facilities all the way around the loop. This is part of a overall project as a connection, a spur route for the Birthplace of America Trail, and is recognized as such through our regional partners. Birthplace of America Trail is eventually an extension of the Capitol Trail, the Virginia Capitol Trail. So this one will run from Jamestown up through Williamsburg, eventually make its way to Yorktown, and then down into Newport News and Hampton, and ending at Fort Monroe. The southern route of that will take it across the ferry into Surrey County, and then down through Isle of Wight and Suffolk, and eventually end in Virginia Beach at First Landing State Park. Our total estimate is now up to about $3.2 million for this segment due to a lot of inflation and other factors that have occurred over the last couple of years. And at this point, that'll come to a total match with $202,582,077 in federal dollars and $645,518 of a local match. So as part of this, the city, or VDOT, requires a resolution from City Council to support this application, and that goes in with the application at the end of the month, should it be approved.
Good, so thank you for the presentation, and just to be clear, what the bulk of this money, 2.5, would be VDOT funds.
Yeah, it's actually coming down through the as transportation alternative funds. Yes,
And
federal.
so from the city would be $645,000.
Correct.
Which we have budgeted in our capital improvement plan.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Small. So just one question. So because we received funding for this project previously, does that give us any advantage for?
It actually does.
Okay.
It's the getting your foot in the door. And so it actually puts us really close to the top priority project in the region.
Good, thank you.
Thank you for this. If everything would go according to plan, what would be the construction timeline? How long would that take to complete?
And that's always the good question.
Always the good question.
And as I've tried to say, this is the cost we use for using the federal dollars, other people's money to help us build our infrastructure. Part of that is we must be patient. It takes time to get through all of the process. If we were awarded these funds, that funds would come around in fiscal year 25 and 26. And so we wouldn't be able to really start construction until FY26. And I would anticipate a year. Because we've already received funding for this, we've actually already started on the engineering work. And actually, I believe the surveying was supposed to start either this week or next week. And we're going to already have the design ready to go, our environmental processes, and work with the property owners on any easement acquisition if we need to. And then hopefully we'll be ready to go as soon as the money's allocated.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really exciting. Berkeley to Berkeley, that's what I hear about all the time as well. As going to Berkeley Middle School a lot from the Monticello pathway, a lot of children ride their bikes. The bike rack at Berkeley Middle is full, I can tell you that much. And so I would hope that, creating a safer pathway would be fantastic.
One other thing I did want to mention that also increased some of the cost, we are planning on lights. along this route. And these will be more, shorter pedestrian level, post-top lights along the route.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you. It is really exciting. I think for those of us who remember all of the discussions on the Monticello Trail, it's like, when's it going to start? And then it's finished, and it's such a great addition, both for safety and for quality of life. And so just one follow-up, you mentioned about the lights. So those lights are pretty high up on the Monticello. So the ones that you're suggesting for this would be
About, not quite half the height.
Okay.
So I think we're looking at about 14, 15 feet, post-top lights.
And since we've already received some funding, is it the idea that you'll get started at one end? I mean, when the engineering work's done, you'll start at Monticello and sort of work your way, or wait until you get all of the funding to actually start construction of the trail?
Right now, the design work's gonna take up a good chunk of the money that's available. And I'd be hesitant to put out a project for construction that would start at one end, and then we'd have to stop, say,
And wait
if we
for the
didn't
rest.
have the rest of the funding. And so I think at this point, if we are awarded the funding, we would put it out. And I don't know if VDOT will allow us actually to have authorization to start construction unless you are fully funded.
And not to get ahead of things, but obviously, you know, we're anxious to get the whole loop completed. Is it the idea that you would go in for phase 3 funds next year, or can you? Or when would
This
the-
is a 2-year cycle, so we might have to wait one more year for phase 3. We're also looking at other different funding opportunities.
Okay, good. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smalls. I certainly agree with the necessity of this trail. I've run along this road. I know recently WJCC schools, if you're within a certain distance to the school, then the bus might not pick you up if you are so close. So I know families have children that walk to school or bike to school 2 times a day on this road. And that shoulder sometimes is not as wide as maybe would make someone feel safe. So I'm very hopeful that we get these funds and that we can complete the trail quickly.
What is the pleasure of council?
So I move that City Council approve Resolution 23-10, which authorizes the city manager to proceed with applying for FY 25-26 transportation alternative set-aside funds from VDOT and to execute all necessary documents relative to carrying out programs for any funds awarded.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, and Mr. Small, before you go, we'd like to consider consideration and action on the proposed resolution 23-11 and 23-12, authorizing the city manager to apply for FY 27-28 VDOT revenue sharing program funds.
Mr. Mayor, before we get started, if I may, pursuant to Section 2.2-3112B1 of the Code of Virginia, I hereby declare that I own property located on Newport Avenue and that I am among a group of more than 3 property owners on Newport Avenue affected by this transaction. But notwithstanding that, I am able to participate in this transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Thank you, Ms. Kernscher. Mr. Small?
In concert with the Transportation Alternatives funding, revenue sharing applications are also due to VDOT at around the same time. Similarly, they also require a resolution from council for those applications. This year, I'm presenting really 2 projects, one a sidewalk project, but it's in 2 different locations. And then the separate is a erosion repair project along one of our roadways. The first one is the sidewalk along South Henry Street. This is from College Landing Park down South Henry Street, about 2,200 linear feet, along a stretch of South Henry that does not have existing sidewalks or lighting. This would install both along that route, all the way to the entrance of the Oaks on Henry at Broadleaf Drive. The second, that is again College Landing Park to the Oaks, 5 to 6 feet wide concrete sidewalk. It includes pedestrian level street lighting, and the survey work for this project began last week. So we're going to, again, similar to what we're doing on the Transportation Alternatives Funds for College Landing, we're starting the engineering work ahead of time using some of the CIP funds that were already previously in the budget. Newport Avenue sidewalk, again, runs between South Boundary Street and Griffin Avenue. This was about 920 linear feet, be a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk along that stretch. This has been requested by the residents for many years. Finally got into the CIP, but I believe with some of the inflation costs that we've had it, as well as some of the details of the design, I think we're at a point now where we may not have enough, and so we think it'd be best if we sought funding through VDOT to help pay for at least half of it. And this would be state aid funding. This is again from Griffin Avenue to South Boundary Street, 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk. We're looking at narrowing the street and installing just a little bit, new curb and gutter, and replacing the driveway aprons along that stretch. And then again, that survey work is to start in the next week or two. Total estimate for both sidewalks right now, we're looking at about $824,400. A lot of that cost is the lighting along South Boundary Street. Or South Henry Street, thank you. So what we're doing is this half of this cost would be covered by city funds. The other half would be through the revenue sharing funds. Our second project is the Route 143 embankment erosion repair. This is shown in some of the out years in the CIP. This is an area up along Merrimack Trail, Route 143, out near what used to be the Farm Fresh at the York County line, just south of Priorslee. And this is an embankment that when it was originally built, the water just shed off the roadway and onto the shoulders and then went down the embankments themselves. York County eventually came in and installed curb and gutter so that they could get a sidewalk in between the guardrail. And when they did, it installed a storm sewer out the back. That storm sewer has created a little bit of an erosion problem as it goes down the steep slope. And so what we want to do is go in there, regrade, extend that storm sewer to the bottom, do some little outlet protection, and regrade that whole uniform slope so that we can stabilize it and prevent any potential issues with the road collapse. So, and with that, this is at the corporate limit with York County. It extends the culvert to the bottom of the embankment, again, enhances the outlet protection, regrades that slope, reseeds it, restore it, and then that total estimate is at about $600,240. And again, half of that would come out of the CIP funds, the other half would come from revenue sharing funds.
Thank you, Mr. Small.
Any questions?
With the embankment issue, as I understand, some of the cause of the issue was brought on by the sidewalk addition.
Some of it was the sidewalk. Some of it was also the issue of just over the years, the erosion had occurred on that bank. This is also one of those banks. It's one of our famous kudzu locations. And so when the kudzu would grow up, it's not as good an erosion protection as it could be. And some years ago, when VDOT came through on the York County side, they actually improved the slope along their side. And so it just never was on our side of the corporate limit.
It just strikes me, all of those extenuating circumstances, you know.
And it's also been many, many years. Yep. Yes.
Seems to me to be a good applicant for some of the other funding that you had mentioned. Along with the other, the two sidewalks, I know that particularly along South Henry Street, that is a sidewalk that many residents have been asking for. You know, it is a significant safety risk there to traverse that area without a sidewalk, and so I hope to see that done. And certainly Newport Avenue, there's really no place to walk but in the middle of the street. It has a lot of pedestrian traffic, so successful in getting these matching grants. So, Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Small. No questions. I just think the three projects where if we can get funding to help us get these completed, that would be great.
I actually had a question about the South Henry Street.
Yes.
Can you just, if you go back to that one, it's actually really, what I know is that there's a bike lane there down South Henry. So how does that, and the design of it, the sidewalk, would it go into the bike lane and the bike lane gets moved out, or what happens?
Our intent is
there?
to try to keep the bike lane existing along that stretch. So what we would do is try to install a curb and gutter along that edge and use the area where the existing ditch is for placement of the sidewalk. And then it's just the hardest part about this project is dealing with the drainage off the road. We have an advantage, especially in that section of the curve, where the road actually slopes the opposite direction because of the super elevation of the road. So that's kind of helping us a little, but we still have some drainage challenges along that route.
And the little bridge there across Paper Mill Creek, that's just another challenge of this.
It's part of the challenge.
Of this design. But this, everything here, the cost of that includes just the whole, would include everything.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I'm glad to see both of these projects on the docket. A lot of us have been advocating for them for many years, and as you say, along South Henry Street, the sidewalk would go where the ditch is, where people tend to walk now because there is no sidewalk. And I think with Colonial Parkway being closed for renovation, South Henry Street has, we've obviously seen a lot more traffic on that street, and so it becomes even more dangerous for people walking along there. It also, I think, really goes to connecting the Oaks and that part of the city with the rest of the city and helps them feel like we're all one. So, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Smalls, for the presentation. I know from the South Henry community and the Newport Avenue community, this sidewalk is one of the top things that's still brought up to me as far as they're wanting to see it built soon. So I'm excited to support as well. Thank you for coming in front of us.
May I have a motion?
Yes, I move that City Council approve Resolutions 23-11 and 23-12 to authorize the city manager to proceed with applying for FY 27-28 VDOT Revenue Sharing Program funds and to execute all necessary documents relative to carrying out programs for any funds awarded.
Second.
Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Thank you. Takes us to item F on the agenda, which is consideration and authorization for the city manager to execute a contract to purchase a new medic unit replacement for the current frontline unit with a contract price of $405,628. Chief Snyder, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council members. Thank you for letting me come up here again, even though I don't have Mark with me, though I'm glad he was successful earlier in his request. Again, we're requesting the authorization from City Council for the city manager to enter into a contract to purchase a pneumatic unit. That is included in the vehicle replacement plan, the 5-year vehicle replacement plan. Current unit being replaced is a 2016 Road Rescue. Current mileage is getting closer to 80,000. Again, it's a part of the 5-year vehicle replacement plan. One thing to note is that we typically try to keep our medic units on a 10-year replacement plan. This one's a little bit early because of the delay that we're seeing in apparatus manufacturing. So to get ahead of that, what you'll see, we put that in this fiscal year so they can stay on schedule. The current medic unit that's being proposed, as Mayor Pons has indicated, is a price of $405,628. It's the same contract we purchased previous medic units off of, which is the...
Was that about network systems?
Yes. Yeah, so we have
Go ahead.
1,300 customers without power. We have we believe a fallen tree is somewhere, and so the university is impacted. Colonial Williamsburg is impacted, and of course the city's impacted. So
Richmond Road and Lafayette, power lights are out,
Yeah.
stoplights are out.
that's right. So Chief Dunn's crews are taking care of that. So do we pause, I assume?
I would say keep going.
Okay. So at any rate,
Aye.
So again, that contract, the HGAC contract we purchased off before for previous medic units, we found that to be a very reliable and cost-effective contract to buy off of. It's important to note that as we've always done in any of our apparatus in the fire department, we have a committee that develops the specifications and the desires of the men and women of what they want for the medic unit. And so this was no different. This medic unit is going to be very similar to the current chassis that we have, you guys see out there. And so we're excited to continue that tradition. We feel like we have a really good product in terms of what we have been purchasing and how they've been performing. The thing I alluded to earlier is that once we go ahead and, if you guys approve and we establish the contract, it'll take 15 to 20 months before we get the vehicle. So we really won't see this vehicle on the streets until summer of 2025. And again, that's been an industry challenge that we've had in the fire and EMS since COVID. And you'll see later on in future fiscal years, we're seeing up to 3 years before we can get fire trucks. So that's just the impact of COVID, lingering effects of it. The other thing that's a slide on talks about industry best practices. So one of the other things that we really enjoy about this Horton ambulance is the incorporation of the safety features for our folks who are sitting in the back and in the front. They've actually had some emerging technology this year that continues to enhance the safety of the providers that utilize the medic unit itself. So again, it's a part of the 5-year vehicle replacement plan. It's within budget. And we request for you guys to allow the city manager to enter the contract with FESCO Emergency Services in the amount of $405,628. And I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Thank you, Chief. Probably not germane to the decision, but this particular medic, and remember we bought it, it was on a different chassis. It's a Ford versus whatever the other kinds.
This one's an International, yes, sir. Excuse me, it's a Freightliner.
Freightliner. The Freightliners are better rides than the Ford, is that correct?
Vice versa. So what we found is that the commercial chassis, whether it's a Freightliner or International, because they're made for the more heavy-duty trucks, they are a little bit more bulky. And the other challenge that we have for them specifically is repair and maintenance. Think about all the commercial chassis out there, whether you're a box truck or your medic unit, you're sitting in line at whatever vendor to repair it, and there is no priority for it being a medic unit or a U-Haul box truck. So our folks have really enjoyed the transition from the larger commercial chassis to the Ford F-50 550 chassis in terms of ride and comfort and just stability of the ambulance. So it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Okay, and maybe I thought, so you're saying what we're going to is a better ride than the Ford?
That is correct, yes,
so
sir.
that's what I was saying. The
Okay.
Ford is not a good ride.
We are going to a Ford.
Oh, we're going back to the Ford?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
gotcha. But what we're replacing is also a Ford?
What we're replacing is a Freightliner.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was confused.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No,
All
no,
right,
no
I'm
worries.
with you now.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Can you talk a little bit about how the cost of, how it's impacted medic unit? I mean, obviously, this is a huge price compared to,
Absolutely.
$238,000, $250,000 medic unit for the same thing. And just like everybody else has seen cost of services increase. Do you have an idea, like percentage-wise, what impact
It's
it's
28%. It's 28% is what we're seeing currently. So the last medic unit that we purchased, we came in front of council, which was in 2021, I believe, was a 319, exact same vehicle, and we're paying 405. So it's about a 28% change, and that is right on point with what we're seeing across the industry for medic units and for fire trucks. And what we're being told is obviously a lag in supply chain. There's been bent up inventory demand because a lot of folks pulled back on CIP projects during COVID to protect their finances. Then also the other piece of that is the emissions controls for the diesels. As new standards are starting to emerge, they're having to change the motors, which are also impacting chassis supply. So all those things in themselves basically combine to have this price increase that we're seeing, and I don't see any change in the near future either.
And were there any new requirements from patient compartment standpoint that were impacted because of COVID?
There has been none. There's been some best practices that we have certainly incorporated within departments themselves, but nothing from a manufacturer standpoint that I'm aware of.
I thought that at one time they were discussing maybe some sterilization system.
They were. Yeah.
covers the entire patient compartment.
Yeah, you can get some of the filtration could have some different mechanisms to be able to more effectively ventilate, but that's not a requirement. And that's, most people I've seen has not gone to those types of systems.
Thank you.
Good questions.
All right, I'm not sure this is a good question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Sure.
Just out of curiosity, what happens to our current vehicle and when we get the new one? Does it just go to the graveyard of medic units?
No,
like
so what we
happens?
had traditionally done is we've always had the city for any of our surplus vehicles, particularly in fire and EMSs, we've always been able to sell them. So our last couple of medic units, we sold one to now Virginia Peninsula Community College. The last one that we just sold went to one of our fire truck vendors who's going to sell that aftermarket or sell it to somebody else. So we've always been able to find a place. And so I think it's important to note, even when the vice mayor was the fire chief, we ended up having 4 medic units. So this medic unit that we're replacing will be a reserve unit until the next medic unit is replaced. So it still will get some usage out of it. And the current reserve will be the one that we sell. So we've always had good luck to sell them and put some money back in city coffers and to the vehicle replacement plan.
Great, thank you so much.
And if you want one.
Yeah, and if you really want one, I don't know if it's cool as riding this bike, but it'll be big.
Yes, thank you for the additional details, and just a couple questions. One, we were talking about the cost of inflation. Does it also have to do with how many vendors there are to choose from? I wouldn't think that many are in the business of making medic units.
Yeah, no, since we've been here, over the last several years, it's been pretty stable in terms of the manufacturers and the vendors that are out there. We've just found really good luck with our Horton medic units. Again, this is a road rescue that we're replacing. Has not been as reliable as our other Hortons that we've had, so it's another reason we're moving away from the road rescue. It's a different manufacturer. But in terms of the number of manufacturers, I don't believe that's a significant cause on the inflation piece.
And the other question was, you said that the men and women from the fire department had input into some of the design features. Was there anything significant that they requested or wanted to ensure was carried over from current designs?
There wasn't anything significant. The last one that we just purchased had some increase in the emergency lighting. But outside of that, there's been very minor changes from this, what I call this next evolution of medic units that we've had here in the city from those commercial chassis. When we went from the commercial chassis to this Ford 550, that was a significant change in which we did make a lot of changes in terms of the patient care compartment and just the functionality of it. But right now, we're really at that point where we're just really tweaking and fine tuning, which has been great because now we have a consistency of the equipment that you're on. So if you're on one medic unit to the next, it's very similar to the previous one, which is very beneficial to functionality.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Thanks for the presentation, Chief Snyder. Just a quick question on costs, similar to my council members. So it's $405,000, but it won't actually hit the road for maybe up to 20 months, right? As I heard it.
Yep.
Is that cost to get in the queue for our manufacturing partner at Ford, or do they start building the apparatus after the order is placed?
So they won't start building it till they get a chassis. So Horton will, they obviously build the patient care compartment and they get the chassis from whatever vendor you choose. Some people may have Dodge, but Dodge is getting out of the game, very similar to what Ms. Ramsey was talking about. And so our box is ready in terms of specifications, but we won't get in queue until they actually get a chassis that's assigned to the Williamsburg Fire Department. And once you get the chassis, then it'll start. So as a matter of fact, we were originally programmed to get a 2023 chassis, and now that since we're in September coming for authorization from City Council, we have already moved on to the 2024 model, which impacts that schedule delay.
And is there any potential for, as the schedule is increased, the cost coming down and the cost to the city also going down?
Are you talking about for this particular medic unit is $405,000? There should be no. This will be a contractual binding price. Anything that goes above and beyond this would be anything that we added to it.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
It's a good
Thank
question.
you, that's all.
I would assume if the auto workers
Oh, right.
don't get the deadline tonight, it could impact it even more.
Absolutely. Yep. We are certainly vulnerable to that. Yes, sir.
Good point. So I move that City Council authorize the city manager to enter into a purchase agreement for a new medic unit with Fesco Emergency Sales Horton Emergency Vehicles for a total purchase price of $405,628.
Second.
Okay,
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. Takes us now to item G, the proposed ordinance 23-04, consideration and action to amend and restate Chapter 18, Article 3 of the Williamsburg City Code by adding Section 18-59 regarding pre-purchase determination of disabled veterans' real estate tax exemption. Ms. Shelton.
So last month, when I did the legislative update, I told you about House Bill 2414, which added a procedure which allows disabled veterans or their spouses to request prior to purchasing a piece of real property in the city a determination as to whether or not they're qualified for the exemption, real estate exemption as to that property. The process is a 20-day process where they ask for the determination and the tax assessor has 20 days to send them a written response. The determination is then given to them and it only becomes effective if they purchase the property. So proposed ordinance 2304 adds that procedure to the city code.
Okay. And again, this is the change in the state.
This and the next action item are housekeeping.
Right. The General Assembly was so generous in passing down this opportunity for tax exemption at the local level. Questions?
Yeah, good questions.
No?
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion?
So I move that City Council adopt proposed ordinance 23-04.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, takes us to item H, proposed ordinance 23-05, consideration and action to amend section 9-286, chapter 9, article 7 of the Williamsburg Code to amend definition of solicitors. Ms. Shelton.
So solicitation is regulated by both the city code and the state code. It's regulated by the city code insofar as door-to-door solicitors are using city streets to engage in their business activities. House Bill 2422 amends the definition of home solicitation sales in the Code of Virginia. Effectively, what we needed to do to the city code to bring it into consistency is to add sale or lease. The other provisions that were added to House Bill 2422 really affect phone solicitations, and we don't regulate phone solicitations. So the proposed ordinance in front of you makes the city code consistent with the definition in the state code.
So again, just a matter of housekeeping. We've got to fix this. Nothing we can do about it, but I think it's a good step. Questions?
No question.
Is there a motion?
So I move that City Council adopt proposed ordinance 23-05.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Next is consideration and action regarding the proposed resolution 23-13 to amend the budget to change the number of allowed full-time equivalent positions in the finance department. Director Damon.
Yeah, I am asking for an increase of 1 in the finance department, and I think there are several factors that have led to this. I'll start with the loss of 2 long-term employees whose years of experience equated to 65 years. So what happened over that term is they acquired numerous responsibilities in time. I'll give you one example. When we replaced an employee that was doing procurement, risk management, accounts payable, overseeing payroll, and the financials for the housing authority, I split that position into 2 positions using another vacant position to do that. So that became a position for procurement agent and risk manager, and then accounts payable. Moving forward, with the deputy finance position, that had not only accumulated duties over 24 years, but had also played an important role in implementing our financial system. having someone come in and try to assume both those duties and learn a new system has been a large plate, the equivalent of, we often say, drinking from the fire hose. In addition to that, we have over the years picked up additional responsibilities in terms of legislative changes and the compliance regulations that have come along with that. We've been delighted that the city has been successful in taking on grants, and we do have a decentralized grant format, so the departments are handling a piece of that, but there's also some compliance issues for finance to handle with that. GASB, our Governmental Accounting Standards Board, has implemented several new standards. There are more on the way. Last year, we implemented leases, which was a fairly large lift. And this year, we'll be implementing subscription-based IT arrangements, which will be an even bigger lift. In addition to that, I think we saw that throughout the years, our auditors have mentioned the need for more cross-training, and I certainly think we would have handled these transitions better with more cross-training. However, with a staff that has a full load already, finding time to not only entertain cross-training, but cross-training isn't something that's once and done. You have to keep it active so that you are learning those skills and keeping them active, and also recognizing any changes that come along through legislative changes, technology changes, or even accounting standards. We also found that we need more documentation or standard operating procedures for those duties. We've made some headway there. One of the things that really helped us, and we still need written documentation, but one of the tools we use is something that we learned through COVID, and that was Teams or Zoom meetings, and it turns out you can record easily on that. So to complement written documentation, we've used some of that, so it's very valuable to be able to go back at any time and not only read how it's done, but be able to see it being done. But to keep that current, we're just going to need additional position to manage that and to be able to distribute that workload adequately. So that's my summary now. Be glad to answer any questions about any of the comments that I've made or questions you might have about the need for the position.
Yeah, thank you, Director Dameron. I don't have any questions. I think maybe I should, but I'll back that up with going back to some of your comments. While technology should seemingly make work easier, there are so many requirements to come along. Even the work that we did to accept some of the federal funds, ARPA funds, not ARPA, required a great deal of special attention.
And we are still reporting on that, even though the funds have been expended. That reporting will go on for some time.
So much more to your department than having somebody sit at the window and collect payments. I think that adding a position is a good idea. I know that as chair of the Finance Committee, that has been a recommendation when we talk about redundancy. Having had employees that have been here for 20 years, we tend to lean on them or over-lean on them, and they take on greater roles. And when we lose them, you essentially lose two people. And so I think we're at a point. While the city is small and mighty, your department is small and mighty, you need a little extra help. So I certainly support the extra position.
Thank you, Ms. Dameron, and you pointed all these things out about cross-training, and I guess the other challenge for you is that if you don't cross-train and you have all these responsibilities for one individual, it's going to cost us in the long term because they're not going to complete all of those responsibilities for the same amount of pay. So whether it's another position or significant increases to the positions that you have, in order to make it happen, it's gonna be a cost to us. And it's such an important part of the organization, and the city's always been well-managed, and department's always been, received accolades, and we definitely don't want to fall behind. So I fully support this request.
Thank you for, your summary and explaining sort of all the things that you have been through to kind of come to this place. And I echo what has been said and don't have any questions, but certainly understand as best I can, the finance department, what it is has led us to this place. So yes, I support it as well.
As do I. I just wanted to make a couple comments. One is wanted to confirm that this is not going to change the FY24 budget. As I understand it, the money is there for this position. Is that correct?
Well, I am having to pull it and increase the budget for that, but I think that we will be able
It'll
to
even out.
Even out. Mhm.
And I would anticipate that all of these extra reporting and grants that you've been working on is not going to decrease, that it will probably only be more in the future.
I do not see it decreasing. I also don't see the accounting requirements decreasing. And while sometimes technology requires a bit more on the front end to get the back end output, I also think that one of the things that we can explore are ways to make the technology that we currently have more efficient for us. There are probably some modules there that haven't been utilized yet, or workflows, and this would give us time to explore those and try to use that technology rather than having to come back and ask for any more. We just need time to be able to vet that out well.
Good. And I know that with all the GIOs and projects that we have going on, a robust finance department is necessary to get all of the contracts issued and things like that. So we don't want anyone to be burning the midnight oil like you frequently do. So
well, when we have a lot of staff that's taken on additional duties, and they've done that well, and they've done that willingly, and I'm very proud of them. But they need that time to be able to plan for the additional items that'll be coming on.
yeah, and we want everyone to have a work-home balance as well. So I support this and additionally.
Thank you, Director Dameron. I'm also in support. You mentioned some of the losses we've had from retirements recently, and I remember one time asking, because you said it, and I know city manager has said it, how can one person do two jobs, right? But it's because of the institutional knowledge that they build up over literal decades in the finance department. And so sometimes when we lose someone who's really critical, it can be that we need to disperse that work across multiple different jobs rather than just place it all onto one person who could do those same tasks, but in 3 times the amount of time that it might have taken someone who's perfected that job. So understanding that the budget will be able to even out between this year and 2024, I'm also in support.
Thank you.
So I move that City Council approve proposed resolution 23-13 as drafted.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay. That takes us through a lot of new business. Mr. Vice Mayor, I don't believe we have anything.
Closed session.
No closed session. The only thing next on the agenda is adjournment. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
We're adjourned.